Welcome back to the Farmstead Forum podcast. I'm your host, Emily Faulkner, and today we're joined by Jenny McCarty from Five Oaks Farm for a powerful conversation about redefining success and building a life that truly supports your family. We're talking about creating income from home using the skills you already have and finding opportunity in the margins of everyday life. If you've ever felt pulled between work and home, this episode will challenge and encourage you. So grab a cup of coffee and stay tuned. Welcome back to the Farmstead Forum podcast. Today we're sitting down with Jenny McCarty from Five Oaks Farm to have an honest conversation about the lie we've been told about success and what it can look like instead. We'll explore building income with intention, using the home as a place of opportunity, and finding simple, meaningful ways to create stability and freedom for your family. It's a refreshing perspective on work, purpose, and what truly matters. Jenny, we're so glad you're here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I bet things are really ramping up now on the farm with spring here, and y'all are probably getting busy planting a garden and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. The business that we ended up growing from our farm is completely flip-flopped because our busy season is from September to about March, and then we primarily do most of our transactions online. So most farms start with summer being their busiest season and doing everything in person. And yeah, it just is completely backwards. But we grow about 80% of our own food. So it's kind of nice that the business kind of takes a nap a little bit through the summer so that we can focus on our own personal goals for the farm. So
Yeah. That's great for time management purposes.
Yeah.
So for those who have not heard Jenny talk before, she was at the Farmstead Forum conference this last year, and you guys heard her talk on creating your homestead business, marketing, that type of stuff. Jenny, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and the business, and then we'll get into the content.
Yeah. So we moved from Alaska to Alabama in 2011. It was a big move. We did it primarily for financial reasons because Alaska didn't provide an opportunity for me to stay home with our kids. At the time that we moved, we had 2 children and then continued on and now have 5. So we moved to Alabama because it was an opportunity to be able to live off of one income instead of me having to work in a traditional job. Once we got here, we were just fascinated by the fact that everything grew. It was easy to get things to grow. And we felt like our half-acre piece of property that we had, it was in a neighborhood with sidewalks and stuff, but there was no HOA. And we just had more land than we ever thought we would have in Alaska. The land is just so expensive. So we moved from a 0.14 acre lot to where there wasn't even enough space on either side of the house to pull a car into the backyard to a half an acre. And we just felt like it was huge. But Michael was working his full-time job, and then I was staying home with the kids. And about the time that we had our third, Michael purchased a DSLR camera for me, and we started planting gardens, and we got chickens, and just really trying to figure out how to stretch the dollars, and get higher quality food without having to pay organic price. And about that time, my health was declining. We wouldn't find out until I was pregnant with my 5th child that I have an autoimmune disease. And that was part of the reason why the quality of food made such a big difference in my health. So that kind of was the theme moving forward. And at some point, Michael said, someday I just want to have land that we can feed ourselves on. And at that time, he was thinking about like shooting deer or, that sort of thing, just enough land that we could actually provide some food sustenance from. And it was a couple years later that I went to pick up some fertilized eggs because we wanted to hatch the chicks out from a local farm. And we got out there and it just clicked. And I saw my kids just peacefully roaming and exploring and the dog just sidling up to my son and his hand going down and scratching his, and they just settled. And I all of a sudden realized if we do this in 5 to 10 years, our kids are not going to grow up on land. They're going to grow up in a neighborhood. And then about the time that we get the land and start to build a house, they're gone. Children don't wait. And so that was really our big instigator. It was like, 5 to 10 years isn't going to work. We need to make this like a goal in 2 to 3 years. We need to shorten that goal line. And so we started getting really serious. I had developed a photography business with that DSLR camera he had gotten me and started tucking away every little bit that I made from the photography business to save up for a down payment on land. And so we eventually were able to purchase land, 17 acres in North Alabama. So then we put our house up for sale, moved into an apartment, and started the process of building our house. When I was pregnant with my 5th child, I was diagnosed with autoimmune disease, and we sold our house when she was 6 months old. And so between those two things, like we had the land and we had my diagnosis, and we were more certain than ever of what nutritional needs I needed, but also just wanting to extend that to the family, we were like, we're working towards the tools of, growing our own food. Once our home was built, we moved into it, and COVID was very shortly after that. And it was such an amazing, I know so many people struggled through that period, but for us as a family, like the property just felt like this safe bubble where none of the fear, confusion, or anything that was going on in the world really touched it. My kids were just playing outside, and we were working on garden projects and things like that.
I guess y'all were
So,
homeschooling. Were you
yes.
homeschooling the kids too?
Yep. I was homeschooled growing up, and I never had intentions to just homeschool all of the kids, but when my oldest was 5, I was just not ready to send him away all day long. I had worked so hard to finally be in a position to be a stay-at-home mom, and just still kind of felt like I was catching up on time with him because of all the full-time work. And so I was like, well, you know what? I can teach him how to read. I'm sure I can do that. So kindergarten isn't that hard. I can do kindergarten, and we'll just decide next year. And then it was one more year and one more year. So yes, they're all 5 of our kids are homeschooled now. So yeah, we're continuing to kind of pick away at things. I had started an Instagram account when we purchased the land because this was quite literally our dream. Like, I think it takes a lot of people time. Like, to expect young kids to know what their dream is straight out of high school is just not reasonable. It took Michael and I until we were in our mid to late 30s, to know what dream we wanted to work towards, like what the thing was that we wanted to pursue. And so blessed that the thing was in a same consistent direction. Being able to work towards this with him has been a true blessing, because I know a lot of people that feel called to a more agricultural, healthy lifestyle, and their spouse isn't necessarily on board. So truly blessed in that area. But yeah, so in the Instagram account, I was just documenting our life, and just building our dream. Coming from a photography background, I was still actively a photographer. I was using the property a lot for a lot of my photo sessions. And but really seeing our life through a documentary sort of lens, and wanting to use my photography skills in remembering all the things along the way, because the kids were just growing so fast and this was our dream. I wanted to make sure that it was remembered, to give us kind of a scrapbook to look back on. So all of the projects and all of the things. And so we had kind of grown following a bit, but nothing substantial. But we got to the place where I started learning about sourdough bread. I had been gluten-free for 5 years, and just due to the autoimmune issues, and realized that in the forums that I was in, a lot of the other people that were diagnosed similarly were able to go to Europe and eat bread with no problems. And then they would come back to the US and they would have the same issues that they had before. And so I started to realize this isn't a gluten issue necessarily. They're doing something different, whether it's the wheat or I need to figure this out. And so just through a lot of research, realized that in European areas and stuff, they still use the traditional method of baking bread, which is the sourdough method. And then also going down the rabbit hole of figuring out what sourdough does, and how it changes the wheat and how and just the whole thing. And I was fascinated and I was excited because I hadn't eaten bread in 5 years. And, sourdough bread is not just any loaf of bread. So it wasn't like just getting a plain old loaf of bread from the store and then eating bread again. I mean, sourdough bread is delicious and warm sourdough bread is amazing. And so I was very, very excited and sharing all of this on Instagram. And things started to grow. Remember back to COVID times, like a lot of people were interested in sourdough bread through COVID. And my interest truly wasn't on, a trend. It was on trend, but it wasn't a trend because I was pursuing it for health reasons. Anyways, been going. We were kind of fighting with the bread molding because anything baked without preservatives does mold quite faster than what you get at the grocery store. And so we started doing more research and then eventually came across the concept of a beeswax bread bag because the linen bags in HVAC situations just don't provide enough protection. So the areas that have higher success with just putting your loaf in a linen bag, that really is because you don't have HVAC removing the humidity from your air and your ambient temperature tends to be a bit warmer because they just live with their windows open and such. So we had beeswax, and I had a fabric stash just from quilting and stuff. And so I made up our first bag and I shared about it because I was excited. It was performing well, performing better than just wrapping it in a towel or keeping it in plastic on the counter. And things exploded.
In a good way, right, for your business. And tell me, so you're talking about your business starting off and kind of like your background and how as far as when you talk about the lie about success, what do you think most people are getting wrong about success today, especially when it comes to work and family life?
Well, success often is viewed through a lens of public acknowledgments, typically. Through our time, a lot of the issue that I saw over time was not kind of a condescending, how's your little business doing? Or, how is your photography gig going? Tell me a little bit more about your side hustle, and it was
Yeah.
very dismissive. And looking back, that photography gig that was really only paying about 15 to 20,000 a year in the end after expenses, that's what moved the needle to make it possible for us to buy the land that our farm is built on now. If we hadn't had that margin, it wouldn't have been possible. And then also, like, as our bread bag business was growing and stuff, it was a home business and it was just something I was doing on the side. And even though it was taking over our life and very profitable and, eventually my husband quit his job and everything, we were still getting questions like, really? Jenny's putting you to work in the evenings? Like, and just comments quite a bit. And so, the tone of things was just so dismissive of the efforts that I was putting in at home to add to our income or to change the trajectory or to reach a goal that we had. And I think often, um, really in the end, how much extra effort would it take to get a $20,000 raise a year for Michael, for my husband? And I was able in the bits and pieces of our life to earn an extra $20,000 that year while still staying home with the kids. Like how impactful to our family, how much I don't know, like how valuable was that to our family as
I don't
far
know.
as moving the needle and just reaching for those goals that we really wanted to change our life, to shape our life differently. And I feel like society in general just downplays that effort to an extent where it's just not valued. It's not recognized. And
Even
yeah,
just being a
so,
stay-at-home mom, it feels like people are like, "So how's it go?" Like, since I've quit being
mhm,
a nurse practitioner, people have just been like, "So how's the mom life going?" Like those comments
mhm,
like you're saying. I'm like, "Oh, it's
yeah,
going good." But for me, it feels like a temporary thing because I eventually, I guess for my clinical background, it's harder. I don't know how to picture myself working from home, but I'm kind of in a different boat over here. I know a lot of people enjoy telemedicine. I really enjoy that direct interaction with patients, getting to know families and patients and their stories and everything. But I can totally see the appeal of working from home and investing your time and the value that it instills in the time with your kids and how you can prioritize what really matters in that, you know, to your family. Before we continue, I want to remind you that all of the show notes and resources mentioned in today's episode are available on our website at farmsteadforum.com. If you're finding value in this content, please take a moment to like this episode and subscribe to the Farmstead Forum podcast on YouTube and Spotify. It truly helps support the show. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram to stay up to date on upcoming episodes, events, and everything happening with Farmstead Forum. Thanks so much for being here and for supporting this community. You mentioned that home already holds untapped assets and systems. Can you give some practical examples of how someone can start turning their home into a source of income without disrupting family life? Or I guess just telling us how you've done that for yourself, how you've molded that to your home business.
yeah. Well, some of it was a lot of the things were kind of laid. The foundation was laid during my time as a photographer because what was so attractive for that was that I could still earn an income, earn some money. It didn't have to be an all or nothing thing. I could earn some money in times that I was able to be away. But I also could kind of tuck a lot of the editing time in and around naps and free time that I had. And if I really ran out of time, I could stay up late and accommodate the work that needed to be done that way. So I've really been reflecting a lot on the draw to MLMs because I went through a couple different phases where I was like, I am willing and I am willing to hustle um, to help contribute financially. I just wasn't willing to compromise my accessibility to the kids and my accessibility to my family. And I think that's what the major draw to MLMs is. You know, sometimes people just sign up for the discounts and stuff, but the people that actually are trying to sell, I think that at its core is what is so attractive is that here is something and they're promising you that you can make an income, but here is something that you can do in the slivers of time throughout the day that you can mold around your family life. And whether it's actually a sustainable business model or whether you're going to actually make money or not, it really comes down to, can I fit this in and around family life? And I think there's so much out there that is kind of suggesting that it's an all or nothing gig. You either have to be all in and leave your family and go to work, or you are relegated to the stay at home mom and you don't have a whole lot of like societal value over here. You know, your IQ drops a few points if you're just a stay at home mom. People just don't listen quite as hard when you're talking. And I I still have a bachelor's in business. I still have really great backgrounds in an experience. I'm still the same person. I just happen to not be going to a 9 to 5. And so all of those situations, identifying what it took to kind of slide in and out of business mode throughout the day, to identify those pockets of opportunity to be productive in my business in between the kids. A lot of that multitasking, the scheduling, the email schedules, but then also managing our family schedule and making sure that everything is stocked in the home and organizing meals and everything. I mean, we're talking about inventory, we're talking about logistics, we're talking about scheduling, we're talking about problem solving, and doing that just for your family. Those are business skills. But then working a business in and around your family, that's a whole nother layer of complexity that you don't know very many women that aren't capable of that. And it's just those skills are so downplayed. And the home is such an opportunity because of the flexibility of home, because the kitchen table can have anything on it. It can have a sewing project. It can
Everything.
have coloring.
Everything.
It can have food. It can have, the stuff just dumped at the end of the kitchen table can have anything on it. And what you choose to put on it is completely up to you.
So talking about those time margins that you want to utilize for profit, how realistically, how could someone build income in those small 10 to 20 minute pockets of their day?
Well, Sure. I chose photography, but I know so many women, so many people. Okay, so I read an article not too long ago. I think it was in Time magazine, and it was about the era of the micro bakery. And it was talking about how, kind of with a tone of how there aren't any like seven-figure micro bakeries, like this isn't a legitimate time pursuit or whatnot. And I walked away from that, and that's like highly paraphrasing, but essentially they were looking at micro bakeries through a corporate lens, which is completely not helpful in any way, shape, or form, because the whole concept of a micro bakery is that it's not corporate. You're literally running it out of your house. And so we're not talking about scalability, ability, and we're not talking about any of these like bigger corporate metrics. We're talking about the ability for a mom or a wife or a woman to make money that matters to her home, her own personal ecosystem in a tangible way, flexibly, without leaving her family behind. And the ability to, it was talking about how the average micro bakery earns somewhere between $60,000 to $120,000 a year.
That is crazy
My
to me.
goodness. Like,
Yeah,
how
that's a
can you
lot.
say that is not a meaningful amount of money to a home?
It's a nursing
It
salary right there.
Right. And most of these micro bakeries are only actually selling 3 days a week. So they are typically working or prepping 3 days a week and then actually selling with pickups the other 3 days a week. And oh my goodness, like that is life-changing money right there for most single income homes.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not paying for daycare and you're not paying for going out to eat all the time because you're always on the rat race and running around and all of the things, that is meaningful income. But it's so downplayed. It's so downplayed. So yes, sourdough bread is all the rage and people love it for good reason. And I will shout it from the rooftops until the day I die. But people also are so disenfranchised with the corporate big business. We know what's best. If it hasn't gone through a factory, it's not safe. Just that tone about food. People are waking up and realizing that all the preservatives and all the things are really, really bad for us and hurting our health. And so the very thing that many women feel are a disadvantage, which is, well, I'm just making it in my own kitchen, or it's homemade, or, the packaging isn't perfect, or whatever else. Those are the things that are actually making your product unique and actually making it feel trustworthy. And like, if it's just, yeah, Sandy down the street makes cookies out of her house and she sells them every Tuesday and Thursday, or, Marcia down the street, like, people, for what we feel is a disadvantage with it being homemade and not perfect, that's actually what is giving people the confidence in purchasing it, because they're so much more confident that they trust you, that what you're putting in it is really what's on the label. That you're not putting extra things in there, preservatives and dyes and all of the other things that we're trying to avoid.
Hmm.
You actually have some social trust because it's small and homemade. As soon as things get bigger, that's when people start wondering.
I think there's also a lot of value in just supporting people in your community because, if I'm
Yeah.
buying my deodorant and my lotion and tallow products from one vendor, I have, I feel a sense of, I don't want to say obligation, but I feel like I should be buying stuff from her instead of buying stuff from, the store because I'm supporting another mom who's likely, I think she's homeschooling her kids. I
Hmm.
would much rather support her. And I heard this, I don't want to misquote who I heard, but Rory Feek was talking at his Homestead Festival. And he said that the Amish dollar circulates their community 7 times before it ever leaves that community, which means that they are supporting each other much more than they're supporting the outside community. So that just
Yeah.
helps build stronger businesses, like family businesses and community relationship. So if somebody has already started their business, why don't we talk just a little bit about, starting small and kind of like building demand. You first solved the problem of the bread bags. So why don't you talk about
Hmm.
that because you saw a need and that's before, and you had to do that before you scaled your business. You had to find a problem, you know, come up with the solution and then scale it after you started getting your customer base. So,
Yeah. So we didn't have a huge following at the time. People were just kind of tracking along with our story. And I don't know, if you know social media at all, unless you have something that benefits the viewer, you're probably not going to grow exponentially. Like if you don't have something that they want, whether it's knowledge, whether it's entertainment, whether it's free recipes, whether it's tips and tricks or a physical product. It just seems like growth is harder when there isn't an actual value exchange. And so I truly was approaching social media as a storytelling machine and documenting our story. And there were people that were following along and being entertained just by the lifestyle we were living. And I was sharing tips and tricks about things that we were just overcoming or things I learned or things, I don't know, just as we were learning. We're first generation farmers. And so we have a steep learning curve. We have had a steep learning curve. And we're still learning as we go. Every new thing that we try, there's always a learning curve. And one of the reasons, like the Farmstead Forum has been so valuable, like there's these communities popping up and the transfer of knowledge during those so valuable because a lot of these are becoming less and less common to know how to can, less and less common to know just different herbs that can help different ailments and things like that. It's becoming less known. And even though the information is on the internet, a lot of times for me, the hiccup or the break is like, okay, that's great to know that basil is helpful for X, Y, and Z. But so what do I do? Like eat a leaf or do I dry it? Do I turn it into a tea? Do I, you know, turn it into a compress? Like how do we do this? And how often do I need to take it to get whatever benefit? And all of those pieces to have people that can really just link it all together and say, do this way and it will help with this. And it's just so valuable. Anyways, sorry, sidebar.
are you interested in herbs and learning about that sort of stuff? Herbal medicine?
Extremely,
So
extremely.
there's Suzanne Shires taught our first year. She's a master herbalist that lives in North Carolina, but every month she has what's called the Granny Mentor program. And I think she'll do a like once a week, they'll pick an herb and then they'll do a Zoom call about it. And they'll talk about everything, all the uses, how to prepare it, when do you harvest it, what part do you harvest, and then what do you do with it after that, and all that information. She is a wealth of info, but her website, Simple Homestead Living, if you're interested, in her stuff, but
Absolutely.
she's super sweet, Christian, just loves the Lord. Anyway, that made me when you were talking about the herbal stuff, it made me think about Suzanne. But yeah, that
100%.
we don't well, I'll tell you as a nurse practitioner, the only thing that I was taught in school about herbs was how certain herbs would interact with my pharmaceutical drugs and to
Huh.
also to question the efficacy of herbs based on sourcing. In other words, you can't trust herbs because they don't always come from reliable distributors, just kind of casting shade on the whole thing. So during COVID, I decided that I wanted to do some renewal hours, like for my license. I wanted to do some pharmacology, but for herbs to get some farm hours for herbs. And it was hard, but I did find a course that was accredited. And so I got my hours, but it was like an 80-hour fellowship over a year. And they tried to squeeze it into like webinars and just different things. But yeah, I mean, I didn't know anything about herbs going to nurse practitioner school. I mean, you're just taught to write a prescription and never question the root cause of an illness. So that way you have
Hmm.
repeat customers that will need more prescriptions. It's this whole
Yeah.
thing. So, which is another reason I don't ever want to go back to traditional medicine. I really want to do functional medicine. So
Yay.
that's where my heart is. So I guess our last talking point, since we're reaching our time, let's talk about layered income and household power. You were talking about how even an extra 500 or $1,000 a week can shift decision making power in a household. And how does layered income create stability? What are some simple ways to start building those multiple streams? I guess you were talking about like the micro bakery. I
Yeah.
would even say like tincturing is super easy to learn, doing medicinal tincturing and selling in like a local farm store. Or our
Hmm.
boys have been doing dehydrated dog treats with rabbit hides and feet, that kind of thing. So teaching your kids too, I think is important. Have you taught your kids? Have they become little entrepreneurs?
They have. And so, yes, they have. My Emma, she's 11. She's the one that does all of our lotion bars. And so, I mean, I developed the recipe for our lotion bars, but I taught her how to do it. So she earns a certain amount for every lotion bar that she makes for our farm store. And then Ethan does all of our wood burning. And so he earns a certain amount for all of that. Noah helps with anything and everything. They all earn a certain dollar amount if they're actually working, helping ship and that sort of thing. So we're actively trying to cultivate the entrepreneurial instincts in our kids because really just in different business things that I am interested in and listen to, there's not a whole lot of opportunity for anybody. I mean, the goal isn't to be wealthy, right? The goal is time freedom and to do what you want to do. It's not, it's truly not about the money, at least for us, when we set financial goals. It's what that financial amount means for the freedom, even just basic things, but not having somebody else telling you what and when you need to do things. I mean, I just have a business that I have to maintain, but the financial freedom gives you time freedom. And that's what we have valued more than anything in all of this. But it also gives you agency to do things the way that you feel called or convicted to do them. And so, yes, we're trying to encourage our kids to have an entrepreneurial mindset, whether it's their full time gig or their side gig. We've just seen how powerful having a secondary income source has been in our own life. Even when, like, I mean, I had 5 kids at home. It wasn't like I had a ton of slivers of time, and we homeschooled, so they were always there. It wasn't like I had an overwhelming amount of time to set aside to work on my side hustle or my, side projects. But it's possible. Looking back, I mean, my contribution, n I wouldn't be able to say, "Oh, well, the money that I made was what accomplished purchasing our land," if my husband wasn't going to work every day and paying the rest of the bills. It don't ever I don't ever want somebody to listen to my story and think that my contribution was more important than my husband's, because my contribution wouldn't have meant a whole lot if he wasn't like faithfully going to work every day to cover all of our needs so that I could work on the dream part. Um, but that is the multiple streams of income. We got to a certain point also. Okay, so we're kind of living paycheck to paycheck without my photography income. We were living paycheck to paycheck. And just even the knowledge that if something happened to Michael, how am I going to support 5 kids? Like if I'm just a stay-at-home mom. And my goal was always like, I just want to have an avenue to not completely wreck our life and for them to lose their mom and their dad, if something ever happened to Michael, because all of a sudden I have to be working full time and I'm not and they have to go into school and and their entire life. Losing a parent is hard enough. And so my thought was always, I want my photography business to be strong enough to where I could scale it and work more if I had to, but I don't want to. It's like I knew my limits, like how much I could work and how little I could work. And so having that secondary income source was so, so important in the stability of our home. But then also moving forward, it was important in being able to purchase the land and having some margin so that we could set goals, so that we could work towards them, so that we didn't feel stuck. And just over time, there were different MLMs that I would sign up for because the same reason it was attractive, because the potential of earning some money in the slivers of time, that was really what drew me to them. So layering that income and even just developing, let's say, something else where you start a Facebook or an Instagram page and you're just selling cookies on a regular basis, having a cookie drop day on Fridays and having like they pick it up from your front porch. Most states, all of that would be covered under cottage law. And so you don't need a lot of times you need a cottage bakery certification, but you don't need anything special. You can bake out of your own home. And it's amazing how much, like, let's say you make an extra $100 a week, that's $400 a month. A lot of times that's, you know, somebody's tuition for dance school or, dance, or like even just setting aside $400 a month is meaningful for most families. So developing those different streams of income so that if something happens, you can lean into it. But also if something happens to one, you have other areas to lean into to help compensate.
Mm-hmm. I'll also say winemaking has been a really good side hustle
Yeah.
for me because it's very forgiving. You can just rack it whenever you have time. I mean, it can sit there
Yeah.
longer, and a lot of people like wine, and then they make good gifts too. So, um,
Yeah.
but yeah, coming up with those ideas that fits your family, um, and then you just, I guess, just build it over time. Do you want to
Mhm.
leave our listeners with a final thought or anything else that you wanted to talk about today?
I'm trying to think. We haven't really talked about it. So over time, I was kind of reflecting on a question that was asked of me, like, what would you tell yourself if you had to go back to the beginning? What advice? And I was kind of mulling that question. And I realized that I would tell myself to ask for help sooner. Like as we grew, I spent a really long time just trying to handle it all myself. A lot of 16-hour days for, I don't know, 8 to 12 months. I mean, it was 16-hour days, 7 days a week.
Mm.
And that was, after everything with our business just kind of exploded. And I think that there was a lot of fear and doubt in the mix. Like being a business owner isn't easy. Nobody is ever going to say that starting your own business is the easy path. It's the path that gives you the most agency over your life, decision-making ability, and you control all the factors, but you also have to maintain all the factors. So it's not necessarily less work, but in all of that, there was a lot of doubt on the sustainability of what we were doing and how long it was going to last and is this a fluke and stuff like that. And it got in the way of me asking for help or building help sooner. And in the end, in our business, it's a unconditional it's not a typical business model. So we have a few hourly employees that help with shipping, but the majority of our workforce is local women, and they're connected to us as contractors, but local women that come and pick up supplies from us and take them home and make the products in their own home on their own kitchen tables. And then they bring back the finished products. And we've trained them on how to do all of these things. Bring back the finished products, and then it gets logged. Everybody gets paid on Fridays. And then they pick up more supplies and take them home. And so they can fit it in and around their own family life and help us keep a truly handmade, with love product in our stores, as on our online shop, as we've scaled and as we've been able to grow. But we were trying to scale without help. And in the end, the help that has been built, the community of women that help us make the products that we have for sale, they are by far my favorite part of this business. And it was so amazing I even got to the point where I felt guilty asking somebody else to do something that felt so heavy to me. I didn't want that for anybody else. But then when we first started that process, I was asking somebody to help me make these bread bags. And they came back after making it and getting a couple paychecks, and some with tears in their eyes, saying, "This is such a blessing that I'm able to make an income without having to leave my kids, and being able to just tuck this into our life instead of like moving our life around it." And realizing that what I felt was so heavy and a negative was a huge blessing to somebody else. And I was just trying to hold on to that too tightly. So anyways,
You were
just
stealing
to,
someone else's joy when you weren't asking for
yeah,
help.
yeah, because I had too much on my plate. It felt overfull, overwhelming, and all of that. And when I started to like give that away, give bits and pieces away and ask for help in different areas, it was one of those like mind warp moments where all of a sudden it just clicked. Like, this is quite literally God's plan for this business, like to create jobs for local women so that they can be to their families what they feel called to be, and to give them agency to make those decisions based on where they felt called instead of purely a financial situation. Yeah. So that would be my closing thought is, as you're looking for opportunities to build like agency for your family in your own home, whether you're baking cookies one day a week, or you're trying to bake bread, or you're starting a photography business, or you're signing up for an MLM, or you're any of these things, selling wine, or even just like having kids, if you're trained in an area, being a tutor, like reaching out to your local homeschool community and just like promoting yourself as a tutor, because there's so many moms that need help in certain areas with their kids. And in the homeschool communities, often it's really difficult to find the people that you need to make sure that your child's education is where it should be. There's so many different areas and ways and ideas on how to make a little extra. And I just, kind of going back to the beginning of this chat, stop letting society tell you what a meaningful income is. Stop letting society tell you what your goals should be. Sit down and figure out what a meaningful amount of money would be. Like, set a goal, like whether it's $100 a week, or $500 a month, or $1,000 a month, and break it down. There are so many different ways that you can do that. And there are options on how you can generate that kind of income from your home without having to decide that it's an all or nothing thing where you have to go in and trade 8 hours a day for an income.
Well, Jenny, if people want to purchase your bread bags, how can they find you on social media?
We are on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I can't remember our handles on YouTube and TikTok, but Facebook and Instagram are uh, Five Oaks with an S Farm AL for Alabama. Those are our handles there. And then our website is fiveoaksfarmal.com. And we have our online farm shop there with lots of things. The ladies also make reusable bowl covers. And then my dad makes some really unique bread cutting or breadboards and handmade herb strippers and all kinds of things. So we would love it if you would come and just browse around.
And if you guys missed Jenny's talks at the Farmstead Forum, they are on our website for under $20 for the whole conference, all the recordings. Y'all would really get a lot out of her marketing and business sessions as well. But thank you so much, Jenny, for coming and talking today. Hope you guys enjoy the content, and we look forward to having you back in the future.
Sounds great. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thanks. Hey, thanks for listening. Join our Facebook group and follow us on Instagram for the latest updates. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website for upcoming events. For sponsorship opportunities, reach out to us through our website. See you next time.